Hey friends, Maria here, walking you through the first session. So we're going to be going through some of the materials that you'll be needing. So one of them is a number 2 pencil. I think pencils are great for when you're sketching out some of your lettering. So go ahead and grab one of those. And also a brush marker if you have one. Brush markers are really helpful when you're learning about the weight of the letters. We also have a gel pen. The one I'm using is just a simple Crayola gel pen that I got from a really cool calligraphy set at Target. And that really helps with contrasting between colors and things like that. Then for final, we have a Sharpie. Sharpies are really useful when you're kind of going in and sketching out your project again. So first, I'm gonna be drawing some guidelines that really help me with the flow. I'm going to be using a ruler. You don't have to use a ruler. I think rulers are great, but we kind of always want to follow the natural curve that we always make. This helps with training a little bit when you're freehand lettering. So one thing here to note is that you always want to go down on kind of what may look like a diagonal. And so I'm just drawing a diagonal line here. It's kind of slanted. And this helps me kind of with the flow between connecting the letters. So I'm kind of creating these little loops, these L's, if you will. And this just helps again with that freehand training that you're going to need. It's a technique that really comes from your arm, but mostly your wrist. So the wrist movement becomes pretty natural. And so you can see I'm kind of just moving around my wrist and my quarantine nails kind of guiding that out, but just be sure to kind of follow the flow of where your wrist takes you. And once you really get that technique down, I think it helps with connecting the letters further down. So I'm just kind of continuing to sketch some of these L's. This again helped me a lot with connecting a lot of the letters. Kind of calligraphy follows this very this slanted line kind of diagonal piece that we see here. And so we're going to dive a little bit more into what this looks like, the technique, right? You have your up pattern that you kind of been following, this diagonal line. And from here, you notice, right, these up strokes that you are working on. And when you continue to do some of these, you'll note that there's a stop point. And that's where a lot of the connections happen. And connections in form of letters, right? So I'm going to turn a new leaf here. So now that we have a new page, I'm just going to make some guidelines again using my ruler. Again, you don't have to use one, but I'm just going to be using this one for guidance. And here we're going to kind of lean into that up and down practice simply because it's kind of the basis for a lot of cursive lettering. So we're going to just continue to look at that up and down stroke movement that we were doing earlier. You see, we'll just go up, bring it back down, up, bringing that loop down, up and down, up and down. Not like my credit score, but it goes up and down and loop-de-loop. Here the spacing is kind of rough, and spacing is something we'll go into a little bit afterwards, but you always want to be careful with your spacing. It could shift a lot of the weight with the lettering and stuff like that, but this is just kind of like a basis to, again, really connecting that and practicing. Like I said, it's a lot for the basis of cursive, right? A lot of these loop-de-loops that connect these words overall. So we'll just be diving into that a little bit more. And grab your pencil again because we're about to dive right in. So cursive, like I mentioned, is a lot of connecting your letters so that everything kind of looks like one big loop-de-loop. I'm just kidding. No, if anything, you see here, I'll stop and then bring it back down to connect one letter and then bringing it all together. Now, cursive alphabet is kind of different than the regular written alphabet. So Here, kind of those stops that I was making, I'll point out through this pink marker. So here we see that we're following that natural up angle, right, on these little arrows, and these little dots that I'm drawing are just points where I stopped to connect the letters again. So those are going to be really important when you're drafting a lot of your lettering. So you can use a marker to kind of start out so it helps you guide when you do start lettering. One word we can practice with is flower. This is how it's, written out, but you can write it differently. Obviously, going into the calligraphy or cursive style F here. I'll zoom in a little bit so you can kind of see, right, the F, and we're following that diagonal line. So we got your F here. Making sure y'all can see. So that's kind of how the cursive F is written, and then we'll, connect the L and the O, the W, E, and the R. I'm kind of doing a continuous pattern. You don't have to necessarily move that way. In these little dots, right, you can pick up your pencil and just go right back into it and connect it with other letters. So I'm just kind of highlighting those connecting dots that we kind of touched on earlier that are going to be really important to making sure that everything flows seamlessly. So again, just right back in there, F, L, O, W, E, and R. So this one, though, it's a continuous line. It basically shows that it doesn't stop, right? But that is where the connecting dot would have been, where you could add the R. Or it could just be a continuous line. You can see there with the dots how we have it lined up. So we got our cursive flower, and now we're gonna see how it would be written out in regular kind of lettering, right? The F. The cool thing about calligraphy is that you can have different letters. I think the beauty of it is just always connecting it. So the F here obviously isn't the same as the cursive F, but the piece flower or lower is kind of the connecting piece that makes it look really nice. So a lot of this is kind of the basis of cursive and hand lettering. So it's all about that connecting factor that's gonna make or break kind of the lettering style that you'll have. So now that we have our basis down for like cursive and stuff, we'll dive into an example that we can do. So I'm just going to create some more guidelines with the ruler here. Again, totally optional. So we're going to be doing the word apple just because it was the first thing I saw on my table. And so apple, right where here it is kind of regularly written versus how it would be written in cursive. So I'm just going to draw out my A. It's a pretty big A. Again, following these guides to just have it sort of slanted and bringing it back up to create those P's. The letter P. These are real big, ambitious P's. Also, you'll note that the size in the little bubble out of the P is kind of different, but it's all part of the learning process. You get to look at your designs and then you'll be like, actually, it's too big, or maybe I wanted it smaller. So now we're going to take our Sharpie pen, and you can see kind of the spacing there, but I'm going to kind of fix this up a little bit before I go in there and trace with the Sharpie pen. So just tracing over apple and taking the Sharpie to the paper and tracing over our word. If you can see, I kind of let go of the pen this time. It wasn't a continuous thing, so don't feel afraid that you need to be doing it all in a continuous line. I think that by picking up the pen, it kind of gives you a little bit more guideline. So as you can note here, I just pick it like this could be a continuous line kind of lettering, and I kind of want to show you all that flick stroke when you pick up the pen. So we'll just go and do a little example of the flicking up and coming back down to connect it, and then flick up. Again, it's that wrist movement that you're using. Flick up, and now we're going to connect the L. I noticed I drew it too small earlier, so here's what Apple would look like. Again, that wrist movement is really what's going to make that flick happen. Kind of like Hermione said with her wand. Flick, I'm pretty sure I'm going to say it wrong, but it's a flick of the wrist. Maybe that song is better reference, but you notice when we flick up, our connector dot is too high up now. We can't connect to the P, so we'll flick pretty small so that we can connect to the P now and create our word apple. See, so you always want to be kind of keeping an eye to some of these connector dots that you'll need. And I'm just going to try to fix the L. At this point, I feel like it's too late. But we'll turn a leaf and we'll practice more. Definitely continue to practice and tag the Oak Cliff Cultural Center to see how you all are doing. And I look forward to seeing you next Tuesday.